Well, I think history tells us that Royce probably never would have launched this endeavour himself had it not been for commercial pressures from other people. He had his own business, a very successful business in Manchester as an electrical engineer, and he was something of a perfectionist, and he was all about perfecting his own business. The production of a motor car was really just about efficiently getting him from his home to his business. It wasn't about setting out to make that his primary business at all. He owned a motor car, a second-hand car that he bought, a French car, a Decauville, which unsuccessfully got him from home to work, and so he set out to try and make that a more efficient part of his daily program. Felt he could do better. So he built the first 10-horsepower car, two-cylinder car. It was only as a result of the reliability that that motor car had, and the news of that reaching round the fairly small motor business or motor aficionado clique, if you like, in the UK that brought it to the attention of Charles Rolls in London, who was then selling cars. Again, obviously not his own cars, these were imported cars. He heard about it, and it was his pressure on Royce that made it all start, really. Rolls had had this dream of having a car that was both the best, but also had his name on it. Don't we all dream of something like that? It was then that he heard about this motor car. He asked if the car and Royce could be brought to London so he could try it, and it was made perfectly clear that if he wanted to try it, he'd have to come to Royce in Manchester. So there was a slight standoff to start with, but then he was persuaded by his colleagues and those of Royce to take the train up to Manchester and go and try it.
And what did he think after he tried it?
He tried the car and thought it was just the best thing he'd ever driven, exactly what he was looking for, and the handshake basically took place there and then, and they agreed that whatever Royce could produce, Rolls would sell. And that was in 1904, and then cars started to be made, although the company wasn't actually formed as a legal entity until 1906. Motor cars such as the one behind me started to be made immediately.
And what was the reaction to those cars? When you took them to the Paris Auto Show and I guess had some of the motoring press drive some of them? What did people think?
At that time, of course, motorists were a fairly small number, and they tended to be, by the nature of the expense of automobiles, motor cars, fairly few and fairly rich. So word rapidly spread amongst society circles, which was the automotive circle at the time, that here was a car that was made in the UK and was as good as any that had yet appeared on the scene. We were yet to be afforded the best car in the world tag. That came later. But those who drove it, and of course it wasn't really a question of getting it to the press in those days. There wasn't sort of automotive press per se as we understand it today, although in the UK Autocar magazine was already going. And Autocar were one of the first to try these cars, though nothing really hit the automotive press until the Silver Ghost came along in 1906, 1907. But the early cars earned a reputation amongst the inner circle of wealthy people who could afford cars as being more reliable than anything else that was available at the time. So word of mouth spread, and hence customers came along to buy these motor cars, well-heeled customers. But the fame didn't really extend beyond the sort of society circle until 1907 with the Silver Ghost.
There's another person who's been referred to, I guess, as the hyphen between Rolls and Royce, Claude Johnson.
Johnson, yes, he was the man who made it happen, really.
Why is he called the hyphen?
Johnson was a friend of Charles Rolls. He was a business associate of Rolls to start with. He was actually the first general secretary of the Automobile Club, later the Royal Automobile Club, the RAC. As a friend of Rolls, it was he who was jointly responsible for getting Rolls to take the trip to Manchester in the first place to try the car, dealing with a chap called Ernest Claremont, who was an associate of Royce's in Manchester. Johnson persuaded Rolls to get on the train and go north, much against Rolls's better consideration. He felt that this engineer should come to him, but he didn't. But Johnson saw the opportunity here, and Johnson was much more of a commercial man, a marketing man in modern speak. It was Johnson who then was taken on by Rolls to be the first managing director of the Rolls-Royce company when it was formed, and he was very much the commercial man who made it happen. On one hand, you had Rolls, the salesman and the well-connected aristocrat who could talk to those in society and persuade them to buy his car, and you had Royce, the man who could make this motor car. But neither of them were going to make the company as a commercial entity move forward. It was Johnson who had to do that, and therefore he was the man who brought it together, and as we famously have a hyphen between those two names, he became known as the hyphen.
So things started to go pretty well right from the start, and eventually a new model was introduced, and it became called the Silver Ghost. How did that come about? How did that get a name?
Well, in the very early days, of course, making motor cars was still Royce's secondary business pastime, if you like. He was primarily an electrical engineer, making cranes and dynamos and what have you. So he was still making the odd motor car to obviously an individual order for some of Rolls's friends, stroke customers. They tend to be much the same thing. And a variety of motor cars similar to this were made. 10 horsepower, 15 horsepower, 2 and 3 cylinder cars were made. And then it was Johnson's idea, really, that they should produce a bigger car. So the 40-50 horsepower, which was a larger chassis, was put into development. And on the 1906 Olympia show stand in London, the motor show in London, they showed this chassis and engine of a 40-50 horsepower. And Johnson then commissioned this wonderful body, the Roi de Belge, the King of the Belgians body, to be produced by Barker. The body colour was all silver, all the metalwork on the car was silver-plated. And this 40-50 horsepower was first driven in 1907, having been displayed as a chassis in 1906. Johnson then, very much in the seat as the commercial man, the marketing man, saw the opportunity of this being, in today's speak, something of a great PR opportunity. So it was he who got the motor car into the Scottish reliability trial of June 1907, and then persuaded both some of the automotive press in the early stages of the automotive press, and also the Royal Automobile Club, his old firm, or his old club, to come and monitor the motor car and its performance. Its reliability and its performance in the Scottish reliability trial in 1907 really made the name for that particular motor car. And because of its appearance and because of its refinement, it became nicknamed the Silver Ghost. Cars in those days, because there were so few, often had nicknames. Eventually, of course, all 40-50 horsepowers that were built subsequently became known as Silver Ghosts, and that's where the tradition of the name came from. Having successfully completed and succeeded in being the best motor car in the Scottish reliability trial in 1907, Johnson then decided to show off a bit, and they then drove, under Royal Automobile Club scrutiny, the motor car non-stop between Scotland and London, covering 14,371 miles without involuntary stop. When the car was then disassembled at the end of it, the cost of rectifying worn parts was minimal. So it was really that particular exercise that made the name for that particular motor car and for the company.